Okay.
Good job, Bill, but could you now give us a summary of what's happening? I mean, I'll take a crack at it if you don't want to, but
Of what's happening here?
yes,
The Hymn of the Pearl.
in the
It's
Hymn
just-
of the Pearl.
Yeah, it's the story. Well, we sort of already said it. It's the story.
Well, I mean, we've said it metaphorically because that's what the story is metaphor. But
Oh, you want to hear like a synopsis of what we just?
yeah, I mean, what is the hymn of the prayer telling us about our own lives and what we should learn from it?
I'm not sure the Hymn of the Pearl, Song of the Pearl, is for the lay person.
You don't think the Gnostics were?
Well, I take it back. Yeah, it would be a story they would tell people, but it's sort of like in neurolinguistic programming, where you tell us a story, a sort of a metaphor. It's a way of structuring thought, but you're not really trying to tell anybody something. You're giving them a framework in which they can insert all their own experiences and their
Right.
own understanding.
Sure.
And so it gives them a structure to work through whatever's going on in their life. And that's probably what all myths are for.
Yeah.
And so this is another myth where it's offering a structure for the listener to gain a structuring in which they can see their own life and their own development and their own ultimately their own salvation. So what's happening is they're describing to me it's like a psychology lesson, but that's me. But it's a spiritual lesson. It's telling them, I think it's telling the person that there's a supreme being, and the supreme being comes down to us through these activities, these actions, these structures of you've got the king and queen who sends out their son, and if you identify with within yourself with the king and queen and see them as somehow connected back up with the supreme being, and this is a structure of how you're connected to the supreme being, and how you take a journey in your life and you go out and you've probably already forgotten about this, your regal beginnings, and it's to remind you that you've come from something much bigger than yourself, and that it's you need to bring yourself inside yourself in order to find the path, to find the light, the guidance to get back to this supreme being, which is which is where you start and where you end. And it's a cycle. You go into the world and you come back with the pearl, which gets you into the kingdom of heaven and salvation. And the pearl is your salvation. So
and the pearl is the meaning of your life.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, I think that I would put it a little differently, but I mean, basically, I mean, my criticism of Jungian psychologists is they want to tell you a myth, and for example, I did attend a weekend seminar on Persephone and Demeter, and she tells the myth and she talks about it, but she doesn't tell me how it connects to my life.
Like application?
Okay? It doesn't tell me the application of it, okay? And so it's very airy-fairy, okay, the way they do it. And I understand that Dr. Jung intentionally did that with Answer to Joe. I mean, he didn't want to come in and say the things that needed to be said outright because, in earlier days he would have been burned at the stake. And he probably thought he was going to be burned at the stake even as it was. And so he couldn't say it outright, but he said it in a metaphorical way, in a story kind of way, because he wanted people to have to come to him rather than him come down to their level. But I think we're past that now. Okay, I mean, in those days, things moved very slowly. I mean, the average person of the 15th century only had as much information brought to him as comes in the Sunday New York Times today, right? I mean, I've seen that statistic. And so things were coming very slowly then. But now we have to say, okay, now what does this mean? What does this mean to us, really? I mean, it was Dr. Jung this kook who, built this building in Bollingen and built it with his bare hands and carved out a stone and then died. And, the day he died, a lightning bolt came down and broke the tree in front of his house. Literally, that happened. Right after his death, within an hour of his death, lightning hit this big tree in front of his house and broke it. And so was he this kooky old loner, or did he know something? And after very painstaking work, and the reason we're here is because I've been looking at it for 30 years, feeling that there was something there, but I didn't quite know what, and I'm finally getting it, thanks to Edinger, basically. But thanks to this group, too, because it's pushed me along. So if we look at the Hymn of the Pearl, okay, the message is individuation. And the transpersonal self is much more than, it is a lot of things. Let's say we go to a doctor, okay, for something like I had my knee replaced, so I went to an orthopedic surgeon. But the man who cut open my leg and replaced my knee didn't get there on his own. There were thousands of people involved, people who developed the technology to do it, people who trained him, people who trained the nurses to give me the anesthetic, people who trained the drug companies. And so thousands of people were involved in that 190-minute operation. And that's the transpersonal self. And as Bill was saying, we all come and we're the result of literally millions of years and millions of generations of creatures to be sitting here at this table. Our grandparents, 10,000 generations removed, I don't know if they were yet monkeys, maybe they were by then. But, if you go a million generations removed, what were they? Were they fish, or, were they amphibians by that time? I mean, because when you look at a fetus, and you can go to the science museums and see fetuses at various levels of development, and they do look like fish, and they have gills and so on, and then they evolve beyond that, and so at 15 weeks maybe you don't see the gills anymore, but nonetheless that was part of our ancestry, and it had to be. And it's, it's true of the crazy cicadas. Somehow they too have gone through these millions of generations, and their big thing is
Reproduction.
Let's sleep and have sex.
They've individuated.
But that doesn't lead to consciousness. But our ancestors, those came down a blind alley. But our ancestors came down an alley of light that brought consciousness and made it so that we're the only species that can look at the cosmos and see that it's there and marvel at it. Okay, I don't think an orangutan marvels at the cosmos. I mean, they may look up at it and say, "Oh, that's nice," but
even with that said, I sometimes wonder what the orangutan sees might be enough. That might be just fine.
Well, sure, it's got to be.
He's not envious of anything.
Well, it was enough for our ancestors who were orangutans, right? It had to be.
But even so, I mean, we're just another consciousness or an awareness, and we think we're special, but the orangutan has a life too, and it's
sure, but it's basing its life on instinct.
But that's us talking about him, or it, because you've got to. At some point, you say, "Well, so what? Maybe that's enough."
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, it has to be enough for every species, right? Every species that moves, everything that wiggles.
Well, maybe this whole consciousness experiment that we're into will not work. Maybe that won't be here in a million years.
That could be.
And maybe there'll be something else, and they go, "Those poor slobs, they had consciousness." Can you imagine how,
Right. Well, one of the one of the issues is of the search for extraterrestrial life or intelligence, extraterrestrial intelligence, is did we make contact with that species during a time when they're still alive, or have they destroyed themselves, right?
Well, we have already made contact and we don't know it yet because, right?
Well, that's right, sure, because we time and distance.
They might be on their way here. We don't even realize.
Well, I like. There's two lines. One of them you brought up a few weeks ago was that. Well, one of them is the one I just read recently, was where Jesus said, "I am of another race."
Right.
That's interesting. But you also mentioned they liked human women. I forget what it was that liked human women.
Oh, the giants. Yeah. The fallen angels came down, and they liked human women, and
so
they gave birth to a race of giants.
Yeah.
That's why you have those Mayan temples and the weird things that nobody can figure out with the big heads.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. And so, anyway,
the Freemasons in their church and stuff like that, they supposedly had to follow designs and all that.
what did they do? I'm sorry.
The Freemason church, like the earliest Freemason churches and stuff like that, like there's designs in them, and people look like aliens. I mean, they really large heads, which is very, very cool.
So okay, right.
It's got a history.
So we're open to all this stuff.
Well, I mean, America was founded by Freemasons, and the eyeball over the pyramid on the dollar bill is the eye of God. But anyway, leaving that aside for a moment, because we can really get into it.
Left.
Yeah.
Ding, 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 ding.